My name is Avery, 32 years old, and I've spent most of my life believing in the idea of love, trust, and stability. I live in Chicago, a city that feels like home. My apartment is small but cozy, filled with the memories of the life I've shared with my husband, Thomas. Have you ever trusted someone with your entire heart, only to find out that trust was nothing more than a lie? I thought I had everything I ever wanted: a loving husband, a cozy home, and a future full of dreams. But what I discovered shattered my world. The man I thought I knew had a secret that would change everything. And what's even more shocking, the strength I found within myself to fight back. Stick around, because what I'm about to share will make you question everything you thought you knew about trust, betrayal, and survival. Trust me, you won't want to miss the twists and turns that came next. Before we dive into this journey, if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's get started. The name Avery used to be a melody in my life. My husband, Thomas, would say it with a softness that made it sound like a love song. Each morning, his voice would wake me up like the soft glow of sunrise, whispering that I was his whole world. Those early moments, when everything felt perfect, were everything I thought I needed. At night, when the house was quiet and the world felt far away, his voice would wrap around me like a warm blanket. There was a comfort in hearing him say my name in the dark like a secret only we shared. But the warmth of those words, the tenderness that once made me feel invincible, would soon fade. It wasn't until later that I'd hear my name spoken again. Only this time, the softness was gone, replaced by an icy coldness that sent shivers down my spine. This wasn't the Thomas I had known for years. It was a version of him I never wanted to meet, and I had no idea how far it would push me. The night it all changed, I woke up in the dead of night, the bed beside me empty and cold. A faint unease settled in my chest, like a small spark of panic. I rolled over, hoping to ease myself back into sleep. Maybe Thomas was downstairs or in the bathroom. But as I lay there, ready to slip back into the comforting haze of sleep, I heard it. A whisper. At first it was almost imperceptible, but as I focused, I realized it was his voice. Soft, controlled, but with an edge that I had never heard before. She still doesn't suspect anything. My heart skipped a beat, and that small spark of unease exploded into a full-blown wave of panic. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There it was, the moment everything shifted. The little doubts I had buried deep inside of me began to surface, rushing forward with a tidal force I couldn't ignore. I'd noticed the way Thomas would quickly lock his phone when I entered the room. The late nights at work, the unexplained absences. I had dismissed all of it, chalking it up to stress. But now, it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and I couldn't look away from the drop below. I lay there, frozen. My body was cold, as if all the warmth I'd once felt with him had drained out of me. I moved silently, my feet barely making a sound on the hardwood floors as I crept toward the hallway, the whispers growing louder. Every step felt like a pounding drum in my ears, the silence of the house amplifying the fear building inside me. I found myself standing outside his office door, where a sliver of light leaked through the crack. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath as I listened. What I heard next felt like the final blow. "It's going as planned. Almost done." The words were clipped, calculated, like a predator plotting its next move. My hands shook as I gripped the doorframe, every muscle in my body tensing with the realization that whatever was going on, it was far worse than I had imagined. I turned and hurried back to the bedroom, sliding under the covers just as Thomas reappeared. His presence beside me felt like a lie. How could someone so close to you feel like a stranger in the same bed? As I lay there, pretending to sleep, I couldn't shake the unease that had taken root. There was something Thomas was hiding from me, something I couldn't yet see, but I could feel it, like a heavy weight in the pit of my stomach. The next morning, I found myself in a daze, barely able to focus on the tasks of the day. I moved mechanically, going through the motions while my mind raced with the knowledge that something was terribly wrong. As Thomas made his way out the door for work, I found myself standing at the kitchen counter, staring at my phone. I had always trusted him with the finances. He took care of the bills, the investments, the savings. But today, that trust felt like a noose around my neck. I opened the banking app, hoping for an explanation, but as I scrolled through the transactions, my heart sank. There they were, hundreds of dollars, small withdrawals, nothing major, but enough to raise alarms. There were $500 here, $1,000 there, all gone, vanishing into a void I couldn't understand. It wasn't for bills, it wasn't for investments. This was money disappearing for reasons that made no sense. I barely had time to process what I had found when I heard Thomas's voice behind me. "Just checking the account?" he asked, his tone light, almost too casual. I turned, meeting his gaze, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of tension in his eyes, quickly hidden by a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I shrugged, trying to seem unconcerned, though the storm inside me was growing louder with every passing second. "Yeah, just some withdrawals I don't recognize," I said, my voice steady, but the knot in my stomach tightening with each word. Thomas didn't respond immediately. He walked over to the counter, poured himself a cup of coffee, and took a sip, as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, those are just some small investments I forgot to mention," he said, his words smooth and practiced, but there was a nervous edge in his voice I couldn't ignore. I nodded, pretending to believe him, though inside I was already calculating my next move. I had to get to the bottom of this. There was something off, and I wasn't going to let it slip through the cracks. Throughout the day, I kept a close eye on Thomas. His behavior was strange, more so than usual. He was texting constantly, stepping outside for calls, and each time he did, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. His phone was always face down, as if shielding a secret I was never meant to uncover. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Thomas went to take a shower, leaving his phone on the table. For the first time, he didn't guard it like it was a treasure chest. My heart raced as I grabbed the phone, my fingers trembling as I unlocked the screen. The message that appeared before me felt like a punch in the gut. "Send her the document. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done." A cold wave washed over me. Who was her, and what did "almost done" mean? It was clear now. This wasn't just about money or a small misunderstanding. This was about something far bigger. Thomas wasn't just hiding something from me. He was actively orchestrating something that could destroy everything. I quickly set the phone back down, my heart thudding in my chest. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, and now I knew what I had to do. The next morning, everything felt different. The air in the house felt heavier, charged with the knowledge of what I had discovered. I watched Thomas as he moved around the kitchen, his usual smile plastered on his face, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions churning inside me. How could he act so normal? How could he look at me, speak to me, as if nothing had changed? The betrayal that weighed on me was suffocating, and I could barely breathe in his presence. Yet, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to confront him just yet. No, I needed to play it smart. I needed to know everything before making my move. This wasn't just about catching him in a lie, it was about protecting myself from whatever he was planning. I kept my composure, greeted him with the same smile I had worn for years, and went about my day like nothing was wrong. But inside, the clock was ticking. Every second that passed felt like an eternity as I fought the urge to confront him, to demand answers. That evening, when Thomas went to the gym, I took my chance. I didn't have all the pieces yet, but I needed to dig deeper. I had to understand what was happening, who was involved, and how far Thomas was willing to go. My first instinct was to dive into the financial records again. If Thomas had been hiding money, there had to be a paper trail, right? I pulled out the laptop and logged into our joint accounts. The withdrawals, those suspicious amounts, were still haunting me. I scanned through the history, each line of code on the screen feeling like a red flag. Then, I found something. A series of transfers, almost like clockwork. The dates matched the messages I had read earlier, and my stomach turned as I realized the money was going somewhere, and to someone I didn't recognize. It wasn't just an affair, I thought. It wasn't just an emotional betrayal. No, Thomas was setting something up, something that would affect both of us financially, and probably destroy me in the process. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. But I needed to know exactly where all this was going. Who was she? Who was he working with? I couldn't confront him yet. Not when there were so many unanswered questions. In the midst of all this, I reached out to Rachel, my best friend from college, who is now a financial analyst. She'd always been sharp, quick to pick up on things I missed, and I trusted her judgment more than anyone else's. When I told her about the strange transactions, her response was swift. Avery, you need to protect yourself. This isn't just about some bad investments or a few withdrawals. This is something bigger, Rachel warned me, her voice tense. You're not just being cheated on, Avery. He's hiding money, he's plotting something, and it's about time you took action. Her words hung in the air, a mixture of shock and urgency. It was like she was speaking directly to the core of the problem, pulling me out of the fog I'd been in for days. She was right. Thomas wasn't just hiding secrets, he was scheming, and I was at the center of it. I spent the next few days in a haze of fear and determination. I knew I needed to act, but I wasn't sure how. The financials didn't make sense, and Thomas was more elusive than ever. Every time I thought I was close to finding the truth, he would slip away, disappearing into another excuse. Then, a new development hit me like a freight train. A message popped up on my phone one evening. It was an anonymous account, the kind you don't expect to see when you're trying to figure out your life. But the words it held made my blood run cold. Be careful, Avery. Thomas is playing a dangerous game, and you're his pawn. Watch your back. It felt like a warning, a cold reminder that I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband anymore. I was involved in something far deeper, something that reached beyond our marriage. Someone, someone I didn't even know, was involved in this, and they were using me as a means to an end. I thought back to all the times Thomas had seemed so calm, so assured. I had never seen the cracks, the weakness. I had never known the man I married could be capable of something so devious, so far-reaching. It was clear now. He wasn't just betraying me in one way. He was planning something far more insidious, and he had a whole team behind him. The fear that had clung to my chest for days began to morph into something else. Resolve. I couldn't just sit here and let him ruin everything I had worked for. If he thought he could use me, if he thought he could take everything from me, he was gravely mistaken. I would not be a passive participant in my own undoing. I didn't know how I would do it, or what the next steps were, but I had no choice. The stakes were too high. This wasn't just about him being unfaithful. This was about taking back control of my life. The following morning, as I sipped my coffee, the weight of everything I had uncovered settled heavily on my shoulders. It felt as though I was standing at the edge of a cliff, peering down into the unknown abyss below. My husband, the man I had trusted with everything, my heart, my life, my future, was now the very reason I was questioning my own sense of safety. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a complete and calculated attack on my entire existence. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't going to let Thomas walk all over me. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative of my life any longer. No longer would I be the passive bystander in this twisted drama he was creating. If he wanted a war, I would give him one, but I would fight it on my terms, not his. The day went on in a blur. My mind raced through different scenarios, trying to figure out the best way to take action. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I needed to protect myself, and I needed to do it fast. If Thomas was planning something as grand as I suspected, it would only be a matter of time before he made his move. The first step was clear. I had to gather everything I could. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about finding every scrap of evidence that would allow me to protect myself, my assets, and my future. As I sat in front of the laptop again that evening, I went through the financial records one more time. My hands trembled as I clicked through pages of transactions, searching for anything that could give me more clarity. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of uncovering something far more sinister than a simple financial scheme. My eyes scanned the account activity, looking for patterns or irregularities. There it was again, the mysterious series of transfers, the ones I'd noticed before. They were going to a company I didn't recognize, one that had no connection to anything I knew of. It was a shell company, designed to look legitimate while moving money out of our reach. My heart sank as I realized the extent of what Thomas had been doing behind my back. This wasn't just a matter of secret spending or a few hidden debts. It was a full-blown financial operation. If he had been funneling money through these channels for months, it meant that he had been preparing for something much bigger. And if I didn't act quickly, it would be too late for me to recover any of it. I spent the next few days pulling together as much information as I could, consulting with Rachel, who was now more than just a friend. She had become my partner in this fight for survival. She helped me understand the complex web of financial transactions that Thomas had carefully orchestrated, advising me on how best to secure my assets. Rachel was my lifeline, my sounding board, and the only person who seemed to understand the magnitude of what I was facing. But even as we worked to piece together a defense plan, I knew that my best option was to get legal counsel, someone who could not only guide me through this maze of deceit, but also help me protect what was rightfully mine. I called Anna, my lawyer and trusted friend from college. She had always been level-headed and sharp, someone I could trust implicitly in times like these. When I explained the situation to her, her response was immediate. "Avery, you need to move fast. The longer you wait, the more dangerous this becomes. Thomas is already plotting his next move. If he's been hiding assets like this, you need to get ahead of him before it's too late." Her words hit home. It wasn't just about catching him anymore. It was about protecting my future, my home, and everything I had worked so hard for. I wasn't going to let Thomas's lies and manipulations destroy my life, not without a fight. Over the next few days, I met with Anna regularly, laying the groundwork for a plan to secure my assets. We discussed everything from transferring my investments to opening new accounts in my name. Anna also advised me to start taking legal action. Nothing too aggressive, but enough to send a clear message to Thomas that I was no longer an easy target. Despite my resolve, the emotional toll was immense. Each day, the weight of the situation pressed down on me harder. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. Thomas was someone I had shared my life with, someone I had trusted implicitly. And now, I had to prepare for a confrontation that could break me completely. But as the days passed, my resolve only grew stronger. I had no choice but to fight back. If Thomas thought he could tear apart everything I had worked for, he was wrong. The more I learned about the steps he was taking, the more I realized I had the power to turn the tables. One evening, as I sat with Anna at her office, I felt the fear begin to lift. She handed me a folder filled with legal documents, each one designed to protect me from any further attempts at manipulation. "This is just the beginning," Anna said, her voice calm but resolute. "You have the upper hand now, Avery. You're no longer at his mercy." It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had control over my own fate. I would fight for everything that was mine, and I would do it without hesitation. The next step was to gather more evidence. I knew Thomas had been hiding things, keeping secrets that were bigger than I could even imagine. And I had to find those secrets before he had a chance to erase them. The house felt like a ticking time bomb, each minute that passed only increasing the tension. I wasn't sure how much time I had before Thomas realized that I was onto him. But I wasn't going to wait idly by. I had learned enough to know that I had the tools to fight back. And I wasn't going to let Thomas win. The next few days were a blur of action and anxiety. I was hyper-aware of everything happening around me, every glance Thomas gave me, every word he spoke, each one now feeling like a clue in a puzzle I was desperate to solve. The house that had once felt like a home now felt like a battlefield, a place of constant tension and quiet threats. I couldn't shake the feeling that with every passing day, Thomas was inching closer to executing whatever plan he had concocted. I had no time to waste. Rachel and Anna became my allies in this battle, providing the clarity and support I needed to keep moving forward. But even with their help, I knew the most important part of this game was the one I had to play on my own. learning how to outmaneuver Thomas, how to anticipate his next move before he could pull the strings too tightly. I was getting closer. I could feel it. But the closer I got, the more dangerous it became. I started to notice things in the house I hadn't before, things that had slipped under my radar in the past. I paid closer attention to the locked drawers in his office, the way he took calls outside with a nervous glance over his shoulder, the increasing frequency of late nights at work. Each of these subtle actions added to the puzzle I was constructing, piece by piece. The more I dug, the more I realized that Thomas wasn't just hiding financial details. No, he had orchestrated a whole network of deceit. It wasn't just the money he was siphoning away, it was the future he was trying to steal from me. The house, the savings accounts, the investments, all of it was at risk if I didn't act quickly enough. But I wasn't going to let him take everything. I had spent years building a life with Thomas, believing in our future, trusting that he would be the one to support me, to have my back no matter what. And now, it felt as though that future was slipping away from me, piece by piece. But I had learned something important in the process. I wasn't helpless. In fact, I was stronger than I had ever realized. I had spent so much of my life trusting others to take care of me, but this betrayal had forced me to look inward and discover the strength I had been hiding all along. And now, I was determined to protect everything that mattered to me. One evening, after Thomas left for work, I sat down at the kitchen table and started going through the documents that Anna had prepared for me. There were forms, agreements, and legal steps that would help me protect my assets. But I knew there was one more piece of the puzzle I needed. The final confirmation that Thomas was indeed planning something far beyond what I had suspected. I called Rachel again, my voice shaking as I spoke. "I need to get into his computer," I said, my mind racing with the consequences of what I was about to ask her to do. "There's got to be something on there. Emails, files, anything that will give me proof of what he's planning." Rachel hesitated for a moment, and I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Avery, are you sure about this? This could get complicated. If you're caught, it could make everything worse." "I have to do it," I replied firmly. "I have to know the truth. I can't keep guessing and hoping he'll slip up. I need to take control." I could almost hear her take a deep breath on the other end of the line. "Okay, I'll help. We'll make sure everything's handled carefully. Just be prepared for what you might find." I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I might uncover, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't back down now. Later that evening, as darkness fell over the house, I found myself standing in front of Thomas's desk. His computer sat there, innocently, as if it didn't hold the answers to everything I had been questioning. My heart raced as I opened it, the familiar hum of the machine sounding like a countdown in my ears. I was taking a huge risk, but the stakes were too high for me to care anymore. The screen lit up, and I quickly navigated to the files I had seen him working on earlier, files that I knew weren't related to anything normal in his work. As I clicked through folder after folder, my hands trembling, I finally found what I had been looking for. A series of emails and spreadsheets detailing financial transactions, property transfers, and even legal documents, all signed with his name and the name of someone I didn't recognize. The name Leah appeared frequently in the documents, someone who seemed to be orchestrating a good portion of the transactions with Thomas. But it wasn't just the financial details that caught my attention. There were documents that outlined future plans, plans that included me, but not in the way I had ever imagined. These weren't business plans or investments, these were escape routes. There was even a section of the documents labeled contingency plans that detailed exactly how Thomas intended to divide up assets in case of a legal dispute. It became clear now. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of everything we had built together. He had been preparing for a life without me, and the entire time, I had been none the wiser. I felt a cold wave of nausea roll over me as I realized just how far Thomas had gone. Not only was he planning to take everything from me, but he was doing it behind my back in the most calculated way possible. And the worst part? He thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not this time. I quickly backed up the documents, knowing I would need them as evidence later. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was the beginning of the end for Thomas, and I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. I set the laptop down, my heart still pounding in my chest. I had the proof I needed. The next step was to take action, to make sure Thomas couldn't follow through with his plan. But as I stood there, staring at the files, I realized something even more important. I had regained control. I was no longer the woman who trusted blindly, the woman who had let Thomas dictate the terms of our life together. I was taking control of my own future. And Thomas? He was about to learn that I wasn't someone to be underestimated. The realization hit me like a thunderclap, the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just fighting for the life I'd built with Thomas. I was fighting for myself, for my dignity, for my freedom. The weight of everything I had uncovered settled like a heavy stone in my chest, but there was no turning back now. I had the evidence I needed, and I was no longer going to let Thomas pull the strings in my life. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming control and protecting everything that was mine. I spent the next few hours carefully organizing the documents I had found, backing up everything onto a secure drive. As I worked, I kept thinking about the next step. I couldn't confront Thomas directly yet. If I did, he'd have the upper hand. No, I needed a strategy, a plan that would ensure my safety and make it impossible for him to take advantage of me. The first thing I did was call Anna. She had already been helping me prepare for the worst, but now it was time to take concrete action. I couldn't let Thomas have the element of surprise anymore. I had to be one step ahead. Anna was calm, as always, when she answered the phone. "Avery, I've been expecting your call," she said, and I could hear the quiet confidence in her voice. "You've gathered everything you need. What's the next move?" I exhaled deeply, feeling the tension of the past few days begin to release from my shoulders. I need to make sure he can't access any of our joint accounts, and I need to protect my assets before he tries to do anything drastic. We need to act fast. Anna paused for a moment before responding. "You're right. I'll work with your bank and get the necessary legal protections in place. But I think it's time to start thinking about the bigger picture. You need to think about your long-term safety, Avery. What are you going to do once you confront him?" Her words hung in the air for a moment. The plan was to protect my financial future, but that wasn't enough. I had to consider how to distance myself from Thomas entirely, how to sever the ties between us in every way possible. I couldn't stay in a marriage that had been built on deceit and manipulation, not when I had finally seen the truth of what Thomas was capable of. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "But I know one thing. I need to be prepared for anything. I can't trust him anymore. He's already proven how far he's willing to go to destroy me." Anna's voice softened. "You're stronger than you realize, Avery. You've been through a lot, and you've kept it together. Now it's time to finish what you started. You have the upper hand. Don't let him take it from you." Her words were like a lifeline. They reminded me that I wasn't alone in this fight, and that the power was in my hands. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let Thomas manipulate me any longer. I was going to take control and stand up for myself, no matter the cost. As I hung up the phone, I took a moment to reflect. There was no going back from here. I had uncovered the full extent of Thomas's betrayal, and I knew what I had to do next. But there was still one question that lingered in my mind. How far would Thomas go to make sure his plan succeeded? And more importantly, how far would I have to go to protect myself? The days that followed were filled with meticulous planning. I started the process of transferring my investments, locking down my bank accounts, and putting legal protections in place. Anna worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring that every move I made was legal and irreversible. But I knew that Thomas was watching me closely. He was already suspicious of my behavior, and I couldn't afford to slip up now. I had to act like everything was normal, like I hadn't discovered the full extent of his betrayal. Every time he came home, I greeted him with the same smile, the same questions about his day, as though nothing had changed. But inside, I was preparing for the inevitable confrontation. It wasn't long before the moment I had been dreading arrived. Thomas came home early one evening, his demeanor different from the usual, more distant, more guarded. He sat down at the table across from me, his eyes not meeting mine, his fingers tapping nervously on the surface. "Avery," he began, his voice tight. "We need to talk." My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I wondered if he knew what I had found. Had he finally figured out that I had uncovered his lies? But I forced myself to stay calm, to not show any fear. This was the moment I had been preparing for, and I would not let him see how much he had already shaken me. "About what?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm swirling inside me. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. There was a flicker of something. Guilt, perhaps, or maybe just the weight of his own lies catching up with him. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what's best for both of us. I think it's time for us to part ways. We've grown apart, and I don't want things to get any more tense than they already are." I felt a strange sense of detachment wash over me. It wasn't that I wasn't devastated. Part of me was still aching from the betrayal. But I knew, deep down, that this was a turning point. He had finally made the decision for both of us, but I wasn't going to let him walk away with everything. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider his words. "You're right," I said, my voice calm. "We've grown apart, but there's something you should know before we talk about anything else." Thomas raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard by my response. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. "I've already protected everything. All of our assets, our investments, the house, they're all secure. You won't be able to take anything from me anymore." The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment I thought I might have crossed a line I wasn't ready to face, but the shock in Thomas's eyes was enough to assure me that I had done the right thing. He wasn't expecting this. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me, take everything I had worked for, but I had outplayed him. His face contorted with rage as he struggled to maintain his composure. "You can't do this, Avery," he spat, his voice shaking with anger. "I won't let you get away with this." But I wasn't intimidated, not anymore. The power had shifted, and it was my turn to take control of my future. The weight of Thomas's words hung in the air like a dense fog. His anger was palpable, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. But I stood my ground, feeling a strange sense of power growing inside me. It wasn't just the legal protections I had put in place, though they gave me some semblance of security. It was the fact that I had finally taken control of my own life again. No more secrets, no more lies. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me or take what was mine. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Thomas was seething, his face red with fury, while I remained calm, resolute. It was as if we were playing a game of chess, each of us waiting for the other to make the next move. But I had already made mine, and I was done waiting. "I don't know what you thought was going to happen, Thomas," I said, my voice steady. "But you've underestimated me. I'm not the same woman you married." His jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "You think you've won? You've got no idea who you're messing with." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "I know exactly who I'm messing with. The man I thought I loved, the man I trusted, turned out to be a liar and a manipulator. You've been playing me for a fool, but I'm done being your pawn." Thomas's face twisted with disbelief, and for a moment I saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. But it was fleeting. He quickly regained his composure, his arrogance returning in full force. "You'll regret this," he warned, his voice low and threatening. "I'll make sure of it." But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had faced the truth, the cold, hard reality of who Thomas really was, and I was done allowing him to control my life. His threats didn't scare me. They only made me more determined to finish what I had started. "I don't think you understand," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is over, Thomas. I'm done with you, and I'm done with the lies. You may think you can intimidate me, but I'm not backing down. You've already lost." The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas stood there, his fists still clenched, his body vibrating with rage. But I wasn't backing down. I had prepared for this moment. I had planned for this day, and now that it was here, I would not let him take anything from me. Eventually, Thomas spoke again, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won? Fine. But you haven't seen the last of me. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, but with a sense of finality that had been missing for so long. I was done. I had confronted him, and I had taken control of my life. No matter what he did next, I was ready for it. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and frantic preparations. I knew Thomas would try to fight back. He wouldn't let this go without a fight. But I was ready. Anna had already prepared the necessary paperwork to protect my assets, and I had taken all the necessary steps to ensure that nothing he tried could touch me. I had my lawyer on speed dial, and I wasn't afraid to use them. Then came the envelope. It arrived in the mail one morning, a thick stack of papers that sent a chill down my spine as soon as I saw the return address. Thomas's lawyer. My heart raced as I tore it open, and as I scanned the contents, my blood ran cold. The papers were a formal petition for divorce, but that wasn't the worst part. Thomas was demanding half of everything: the house, the bank accounts, even a monthly allowance. He claimed I had forced him into this situation, that he had sacrificed his career for our marriage, and now he wanted his fair share. It was audacious, outrageous even. The sheer nerve of him. He had been the one plotting behind my back, hiding money, betraying me in ways I couldn't even fathom, and now he was trying to twist the narrative to make it seem like I was the villain. I called Anna immediately, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "He's gone too far this time," I said, flipping through the stack of papers. "He's trying to take everything from me." Anna's voice was calm but firm. "He's trying to manipulate you. Don't let him succeed. We'll fight this. We'll show him that he's not going to get away with it." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The anger I felt was real, but it wasn't the only emotion running through me. I felt something else too: relief. I had known this was coming, and now that it was here, I felt ready to fight. I wasn't going to let Thomas have his way. Not this time. The days that followed were filled with legal preparations. Anna worked tirelessly, filing a counterclaim for defamation and financial fraud, preparing the necessary documentation to prove that Thomas's claims were nothing more than lies. She was confident we would win, but I knew that this battle was far from over. Thomas wasn't the type to back down easily, and I wasn't naive enough to think he wouldn't try to pull more tricks, but I was no longer afraid. I had the law on my side, and I had my own strength. The woman who had once blindly trusted Thomas was gone. In her place stood someone who had fought for her own future, who had learned that the greatest betrayal isn't always the one you see coming. Sometimes it's the one that happens right under your nose, and the hardest part is finding the strength to walk away when you realize the truth. I knew there was more to come, more legal battles, more court appearances, more fights. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I was no longer a victim. I was a fighter, and I would keep fighting until the last battle was won. The legal process, though grueling, became my battleground. Each document that came through, each court summons, was a reminder that the war I was fighting wasn't just for my financial security. It was for my sense of self, my independence, and my dignity. I had spent far too long allowing Thomas's lies to define me, allowing his manipulations to dictate my life. But now, I was writing my own story, and it was one of strength and resilience. With Anna by my side, I felt an unwavering sense of determination. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that I was ready for whatever came next. Thomas had underestimated me, thinking he could manipulate me into submission. But what he didn't count on was the fire that had been ignited within me. A fire that refused to be extinguished, no matter what lies or threats he tried to throw my way. The court dates loomed on the horizon, each one bringing us closer to the resolution I had been waiting for. Thomas had hired a high-powered lawyer, someone who specialized in aggressive tactics, but I wasn't afraid. Anna had prepared me for this. She had walked me through every step, every strategy, ensuring that I was ready to face whatever Thomas's legal team threw at me. I wasn't going to let them scare me. I spent my days reviewing every piece of evidence I had gathered: emails, bank statements, the files on Thomas's computer, the legal documents I had carefully backed up. The amount of information I had on him was staggering, and I knew it would be enough to show the truth. There was no escaping it. Thomas had been lying, stealing, and plotting behind my back, and now the world was going to see him for who he truly was. But just when I thought things couldn't get any more intense, something unexpected happened. One morning, as I was going through some more paperwork in my living room, my phone buzzed. It was an anonymous message. "Be careful, Avery. Thomas doesn't play by the rules. He'll go to any lengths to make sure you lose." My heart dropped as I read the words. Was this a threat? I hadn't thought about how desperate Thomas might become, or how far he was willing to go to maintain control. I had always believed that the legal process would bring about justice, but now I wondered if there were other forces at play, forces I wasn't prepared for. I immediately called Anna, my voice shaking as I relayed the message. She listened patiently, then responded with a calmness that grounded me. "This is what we've been preparing for, Avery. People like Thomas don't just give up. But we've got the facts, and the law is on our side. No matter what he tries, he can't manipulate the system forever." Her confidence helped calm my nerves, but a lingering sense of unease remained. Thomas had always been clever, calculating, and now I feared that he would resort to anything to get what he wanted. I wasn't just dealing with a man who had betrayed me. I was dealing with someone who would stop at nothing to win. That evening, as I sat in my living room, staring at the quiet street outside, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led me here. The woman I had been, someone willing to trust, to believe in the good in others, to give her heart without reservation, was gone. In her place stood someone who had learned the hard way that trust must be earned, that love cannot exist in a vacuum of dishonesty and manipulation. It wasn't just the money, the assets, or the legal battles. It was the deeper betrayal, the way Thomas had used my trust against me, the way he had plotted behind my back as if our entire life together had been nothing more than a game to him. What hurt the most was how thoroughly he had convinced me that he was the one who had my best interests at heart. But no more. I was done playing by his rules. The next day, my fears were confirmed. I opened my email to find a forwarded message from Anna. It was a subpoena from Thomas's legal team, demanding that I hand over all my financial records, including the documents I had painstakingly gathered as evidence. They were trying to use my own preparations against me. It was a bold move, but it was a desperate one. I immediately called Anna to discuss the next steps. "He's trying to intimidate me," I said, my voice steady but filled with anger. "He's using the legal system to scare me into backing down." Anna's voice was calm, but I could sense the underlying urgency. "This is exactly what we expected. They'll try everything to make you doubt yourself, to make you give up. But you're stronger than that. We'll fight this. We'll expose the truth, and we'll make sure they can't manipulate the system anymore." I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. I had come so far, and I wasn't going to let Thomas win now. He had spent years building a facade, manipulating me, lying to me. But now, the truth was out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As the days passed, I continued to prepare. I spent hours poring over the evidence, double-checking everything, ensuring that I was ready for whatever Thomas's legal team could throw my way. It was exhausting, emotionally draining work, but I knew it was necessary. Every time I thought about backing down, about letting him have his way, I remembered why I had started this journey in the first place. I wasn't fighting just for the money or the house. I was fighting for my own dignity, for the woman I had become. Thomas had spent too long in control, but now the tables were turning. He wasn't going to break me. I had already been broken once, by his lies, by his manipulations, and I had rebuilt myself stronger than ever. This time, I wasn't going to let him tear me down. The day of the hearing arrived, and as I stood outside the courtroom, my heart raced with a mixture of fear and anticipation. I had no idea what Thomas had in store for me, but I wasn't going to back down. This was my fight, my story, and I was going to make sure the world saw the truth. As the door to the courtroom swung open, I took a deep breath and walked in. This was it. The final battle. The courtroom was everything I had imagined and more. Cold, sterile, with an almost suffocating air of formality. I took a deep breath as I walked through the doors, my mind racing with the weight of everything I had been through to get to this moment. The journey had been long, filled with pain, betrayal, and fear. But I had made it here. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a battle for my future, for my freedom, for the woman I had become. As I stepped into the courtroom, my eyes immediately found Thomas. He was sitting at the plaintiff's table, his face expressionless, as if trying to hide the anxiety I knew must be gnawing at him. He had always been good at keeping his emotions in check, but today I could see the cracks in his facade. He was nervous. For the first time, I wasn't the one who felt vulnerable. I sat down at the defendant's table, where Anna had already taken her place. Her presence was a comfort, a reminder that I wasn't in this alone. I had spent so many nights worrying about the outcome, about what would happen if Thomas won. But now, as I looked around the courtroom, I realized that this moment was mine. The power had shifted. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. As he took his seat, he looked over the case files in front of him. I could feel the tension building in the room, like the calm before a storm. Thomas's lawyer stood first, trying to take control of the proceedings, presenting his argument with the same arrogance I had come to expect from Thomas. The accusations were as absurd as I had imagined. He claimed I had been hiding money, manipulating finances, and even accused me of emotional abuse. But I wasn't rattled. I had the evidence on my side, and I knew the truth would come out. Anna remained calm, her face stoic as she waited for her turn to speak. The first round of arguments passed quickly, but it was the moment that followed that truly set the stage for everything that came after. Anna stood and began her presentation, each word she spoke cutting through the lies Thomas's lawyer had tried to weave. She laid out the facts: how Thomas had been siphoning money, hiding assets, and even forging documents in an attempt to make me look guilty. The evidence was irrefutable. Thomas's attempts to paint me as the villain were quickly unraveling. As Anna spoke, I felt a growing sense of confidence. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. The fear, the anxiety that had plagued me for so long, was slowly fading. This was my moment. I had fought for my truth, and now I was seeing it exposed for the world to see. But just when I thought the battle was nearly over, Thomas's lawyer dropped a bombshell. A new piece of evidence, one I hadn't anticipated. It was a message from an anonymous source, accusing me of embezzling funds from our joint accounts and providing what appeared to be a forged document to back it up. The room went silent as the judge examined the new evidence. My heart sank. This was the moment Thomas had been waiting for. He was trying to turn the tide in his favor with this new piece of evidence. My mind raced. Who could have given him this? And why now? Anna quickly rose, her expression unwavering. "Your Honor," she began, her voice firm and commanding. "This document is a forgery. We can easily prove that the timestamp is incorrect. This document was created after the account in question was even opened. Furthermore, I've already submitted the proof of Thomas's financial manipulation, which far outweighs anything presented here today." I watched as the judge flipped through the documents, his expression hardening. The anonymous message was nothing but a last-ditch attempt to discredit me. It wasn't the first time Thomas had tried to play dirty, but it would be the last. Anna turned to me, offering a reassuring nod. "We've got this," she whispered. With each passing moment, I could feel the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't going to lose this fight. The truth was on my side, and no matter what Thomas threw at me, it wouldn't change that. The judge called for a brief recess, and I stepped out of the courtroom to take a breath. My heart was racing, but I felt oddly at peace. I had done everything I could to prepare for this moment, and I knew it would all come to an end soon. Thomas's lies, his manipulations, they were all coming undone. He wasn't going to win this time. During the break, I stayed by Anna's side, going over the documents one last time, making sure everything was in place for the final arguments. The final round was upon us, and I could feel the anticipation building in the pit of my stomach. This was it, the culmination of everything I had fought for. When we returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Thomas sat across from me, looking like a man who had lost his confidence. His lawyer tried one final time to push their narrative, but it was clear the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was too solid, too overwhelming. Every lie they had spun was unraveled by the truth we had presented. As Anna made her closing arguments, I could feel the weight of the entire experience hit me. The legal battle, the emotional toll, it had all led to this moment. I had endured so much, but I had never once wavered. I had stood my ground, and now it was finally going to pay off. The judge finally spoke, his voice steady and final. After reviewing the evidence presented, it is clear that the claims made by the plaintiff are without merit. The defendant has provided sufficient proof of financial misconduct on the part of the plaintiff, and the evidence submitted by the plaintiff is both inaccurate and forged. I hereby dismiss the plaintiff's claims and order that the defendant's legal costs be covered by the plaintiff. The courtroom went silent for a moment, the weight of the decision sinking in. And then I exhaled. It was over. Thomas had lost. As the judge's gavel came down, I felt a rush of emotions, relief, pride, and a sense of triumph. I had won. Against all odds, I had fought back and I had won. Thomas sat there, frozen in disbelief, his face pale as he processed the reality of what had just happened. I didn't feel satisfaction in his defeat, though. No, what I felt was freedom. I had reclaimed my life, my future, and my dignity. I walked out of the courtroom, my head held high, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. The battle, the one that had consumed me for so long, was finally over. Thomas's lies had been exposed, and the legal system had ruled in my favor. I could feel the air around me shift, the tension, the constant worry. It was all gone. It was as if I could breathe again. I wasn't naive enough to believe everything would be perfect from here on out. This journey had taken its toll on me emotionally, physically, and mentally. But the victory was mine. I had stood tall in the face of betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. There was no going back now. My life was mine to rebuild, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Thomas, take that from me. Anna stood beside me as we left the courthouse, a small smile on her face. "You did it," she said, her voice warm with pride. "I knew you would." I nodded, the weight of her words settling deep within me. Anna had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal. She had guided me through the legal battles, kept me grounded when I felt like I was drowning in doubt, and never once let me lose sight of what mattered most: my strength, my integrity, and my ability to rise above the chaos. As we walked toward the parking lot, I glanced over at Anna. "I never could have done this without you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You had everything you needed inside of you, Avery. I just helped you find it." The truth of her words hit me like a wave. I had always believed that I needed someone else to save me, to help me navigate the mess that my life had become. But in the end, it wasn't anyone else who saved me. It was me. I had found the courage, the strength, and the resolve to stand up for myself, to fight for my future, and to refuse to let the lies and betrayals of my past define me. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, more hurdles to overcome, but I was ready for whatever came next. I had spent so long living in the shadow of Thomas's manipulations, but now I was stepping into the light. This was my life, and I was going to live it on my own terms. As I drove home that evening, the streets of the city flashing by, I thought about everything I had been through: the heartache, the fear, the anger. But most importantly, I thought about the strength I had discovered within myself. I had faced the ultimate betrayal, and instead of crumbling under its weight, I had fought back. I had taken control, and I had won. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I spent time with friends and family, people who had stood by me throughout this whole ordeal. The love and support I received was overwhelming, and it reminded me that I wasn't alone. I had people who cared about me, who believed in me, and who were there for me no matter what. It was a feeling I had missed, realizing that I wasn't defined by my relationship with Thomas, but by the connections I had with the people who truly mattered. In the days following the trial, I found myself looking forward to the future. It was strange, this new sense of freedom. For so long, I had been consumed by the fear of losing everything, of being betrayed by someone I loved and trusted. But now, I was ready to embrace the life that awaited me, one where I was the author of my own story, where I made the decisions that would shape my future. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, sipping a glass of wine, I reflected on the journey I had just completed. It was hard to believe that just months ago, I had been a woman lost in the fog of betrayal, uncertain of who I could trust or what my future would look like. But now, sitting here, watching the sunset over the city skyline, I realized how far I had come. The transformation wasn't just legal, it was personal. I had gone from being a woman who had allowed herself to be manipulated and deceived to a woman who had taken control of her life and reclaimed her power. It hadn't been easy. It had required courage, resilience, and a willingness to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. But I had done it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. Free from the shackles of Thomas's lies, free from the weight of his betrayal, and free to live the life I had always dreamed of. As I finished my glass of wine and stood up to go inside, I couldn't help but smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was excited about it. I didn't need to rely on anyone else to make me feel complete. I had everything I needed within me. And with that, I knew I was ready. Ready to step forward into this new chapter of my life, to build the future I had always wanted, and to never let anyone take that power away from me again. The weeks that followed felt surreal, as if I were living in the aftermath of a storm when the winds had died down, but the effects lingered. For the first time in a long while, the world felt open, full of possibilities. The weight of the legal battle had lifted, but there were moments, small, fleeting, when I would catch myself pausing, feeling the remnants of the emotional scars left behind. The bruises weren't as visible anymore, but they were still there. They were fading, but they weren't gone. I found myself rediscovering things I hadn't realized I had lost, simple pleasures that once brought me joy. I started taking long walks again, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, hearing the rustle of leaves as I strolled through the park. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be in my own skin, without the constant tension and fear of betrayal hovering over me. For so long I had been defined by the relationships I was in, by the people who had shaped my world. But now, I was defining myself, and it was liberating. During this time, I also found solace in reconnecting with old friends. Rachel and I had become closer through this process, and it was with her that I celebrated the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. We had been through so much together: late-night phone calls, the endless legal consultations, the emotional support she gave me when I thought I couldn't go on. She had been my unwavering ally, and I was grateful for her. One evening, as we sat together at a small cafe, Rachel looked at me over her coffee cup, a soft smile on her face. "Avery, you've been through hell and back, but I've never seen you stronger. I mean it." I smiled, though it wasn't without a sense of bittersweetness. I never thought I'd get to this point. Honestly, I thought I'd be broken by now. But I'm not. I'm still here, and I'm still me. Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "You are stronger than you think. You don't need anyone to define you anymore. You've already proven that." Her words stuck with me, not because they were anything new, but because for the first time, I felt them sink in fully. I had been living for so long in the shadow of what had been, what I thought was love, what I thought was security, that I hadn't realized how much of myself I had given away. But now I was reclaiming every piece of me that had been lost along the way, and it felt good. As the months went on, I started looking at the future differently. No longer was I focused on the past, on everything I had lost. Instead, I found myself thinking about what I wanted, what I wanted. The freedom to be myself, to pursue my passions, to build a life that was authentically mine. There was something empowering in knowing that I could start fresh, from scratch, and build something stronger, more true, than what had existed before. I started working again, diving into projects I had put on hold. My career, which had taken a back seat to everything else in my life, suddenly became a source of pride and fulfillment. I realized that I had talents and skills that had always been buried under the weight of a relationship that wasn't serving me. But now, I could apply myself fully to something that was mine, something that no one could take away. Of course, there were still moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether I had done the right thing, whether I had made the right choices. The memories of what Thomas had done still lingered, and every now and then, the fear would creep back in. But it wasn't as strong as it had been. I had faced my fears head on, and I had survived. I had come out stronger on the other side, and I knew deep down that I was never going to let anyone take my power away again. One night, as I sat in my apartment, watching the city lights flicker below, I realized how much had changed. The woman sitting in that chair wasn't the same woman who had walked into the courthouse months ago, uncertain and afraid. That woman had been on the brink of losing everything, but somehow, she had found a way to rise up, to take back control, and to fight for the life she deserved. And now, here I was, at peace with myself, with the life I had fought so hard to rebuild. I wasn't perfect, and I wasn't without scars, but those scars had made me who I was today. They were a reminder of the strength it had taken to face the darkness and come out the other side. The future, though uncertain, felt full of promise. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was complete on my own. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. As the weeks stretched into months, the new life I had begun to build became more than just a survival story. It became an evolution, a transformation from the woman I once was into someone who had discovered her inner strength, her true potential. I no longer feared the future, nor did I dwell on the past. The present was mine to shape. I started to notice the subtle changes around me, how people responded to me differently now that I carried myself with a new sense of purpose. Friends, colleagues, even strangers seemed to recognize the confidence I had developed. It was as if I had stepped into my own power, and the world was responding in kind. No longer was I defined by the betrayals and heartbreaks of the past. Instead, I was defined by my resilience, my ability to overcome, and my unwavering belief that I could handle whatever came my way. One day, as I was walking through the city, lost in thought, I found myself in front of a small bookstore I used to visit with Thomas. I hadn't stepped foot in this place in years. Every time I passed, memories of our time together flooded my mind. It had always been one of our favorite spots, a quiet place to get lost in stories and escape reality for a while. But this time, as I stood there, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel loss. I felt peace. The person I was when I had last entered that bookstore no longer existed. She had been replaced by a woman who had weathered the storm and come out stronger. A woman who didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of books filling my nostrils, and for the first time, I felt like I could truly enjoy the space without the weight of memories hanging over me. I wandered the aisles, browsing titles and letting myself enjoy the moment, fully present. And in that moment, I realized something profound. I was no longer tied to the past. It was like I had shed the final remnants of the old me and embraced the woman I was becoming. That evening, after I returned home, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset over the city. The colors in the sky were vibrant, and I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. It had been a long and painful journey, but it had shaped me into someone capable of standing tall, even in the face of adversity. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The freedom wasn't just the absence of Thomas or the end of the legal battles. It was the freedom to be myself, to live without the constant fear of betrayal or manipulation, to finally be at peace with who I was, independent of anyone else. I realized that while the end of my marriage had been painful, it had also been the catalyst for my growth. I had been forced to confront my fears, to dig deep and discover strengths I didn't know I had. The woman who had walked down the aisle with Thomas was not the woman who stood on that balcony, watching the sunset. I had learned that strength isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving, even in the aftermath of betrayal. It's about finding the courage to move forward and trust yourself again. The next few months were filled with small victories. I continued to rebuild my career, pursuing projects that I had always been passionate about. I made new connections, met new people, and slowly began to expand my world beyond the confines of my past. I didn't need to rush into anything. I was content taking things one step at a time, embracing each moment as it came. But perhaps the most significant change was the shift in my mindset. I had learned to trust myself again. To trust my instincts, my decisions, and my ability to navigate life on my own terms. I no longer sought validation from anyone else. I knew I was worthy, and I didn't need anyone to confirm that for me. As I sat there, reflecting on everything I had learned and everything I had overcome, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the people who had stood by me, for the lessons life had taught me, and for the strength I had found within myself. I had done more than just survive a betrayal. I had transformed it into something that would empower me for the rest of my life, and that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. The road ahead wasn't without its challenges, but I was no longer afraid of them. I had faced the worst and come out stronger. I knew there would be more trials to face, but I was ready. Because I had learned one crucial lesson. No matter how hard life gets, I have the power to overcome it. I am the author of my own story, and no one, not Thomas, not anyone, could ever take that from me. As I stood up and walked back inside, I smiled to myself. The future was uncertain, but it was mine, and I was ready to embrace it. The days that followed felt like a slow unfolding of possibilities. There was no rush to move forward. Instead, I took my time, savoring the feeling of autonomy and peace that had settled in my life. The emotional wounds from my past were still there, but they no longer had the power to define me. I had reclaimed my narrative, and with each new step, I could feel the weight of my past lifting, little by little. One of the most surprising things I found in the aftermath of everything was how much I had neglected my own dreams. For years, I had put my own aspirations on the back burner, believing that I had to prioritize others. Thomas, the marriage, the expectations of those around me. But now, in the quiet of my own space, I realized that I had dreams of my own that had long been forgotten. My career, my passions, and my desires had been overshadowed by my life with Thomas. It was time to rediscover them. I started taking small steps toward things I had always wanted to do, but never had the courage to pursue. One of those steps was writing. I had always loved writing, but it had been something I did only in private, something I brushed aside as a hobby rather than a true passion. But now, I began to write regularly, journals, essays, even short stories. The act of putting my thoughts onto paper felt cathartic. It helped me make sense of everything I had been through and provided an outlet for all the emotions I hadn't known how to express before. As I began to write, I started to uncover things about myself I had long suppressed: fears, dreams, hopes for the future. But most importantly, I realized that writing was a form of reclaiming my voice. For so long, I had let others dictate my story, but now I was the one telling it. I wasn't afraid to speak my truth anymore. My newfound passion for writing led me to a decision that, at the time, felt monumental. I decided to take the leap and enroll in a writing course. It wasn't something I had ever imagined doing before, but as I thought about it, I realized that it was a way for me to step into a new chapter of my life, a chapter where I didn't just survive, I thrived. It was scary, stepping into a world that was entirely new to me, but I was no stranger to fear anymore. I had faced the ultimate betrayal, and I had emerged stronger. What was a writing course compared to that? The day I walked into that classroom, I felt a sense of exhilaration I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just about the writing. It was about taking control of my future in a way I had never done before. The women and men in the class were strangers, but in a way, they were like me. people looking for something new, something that would bring them joy and fulfillment. It felt like the first step in a journey that would shape the rest of my life. Over the weeks that followed, I dove deeper into writing, exploring new genres, experimenting with styles, and sharing my work with others. The process was challenging, yes, but it was also incredibly freeing. I found that with each word I wrote, I was shedding more of the pain from my past. The words became a bridge to my future, one that was no longer defined by Thomas or the life I had once known. It was my future, and I was shaping it. But the changes weren't just confined to my career or my personal growth. I started to explore new relationships, relationships that were based on mutual respect, trust, and shared interests. It was freeing to know that I didn't have to be in a toxic relationship to feel validated. I didn't need to seek approval from anyone else to know that I was worthy of love and respect. I began to date again, but this time, I was intentional about it. I wasn't rushing into anything. I wasn't looking for someone to fix me. I was simply looking for someone who would walk beside me, someone who would respect the person I had become. As the months turned into a year, I saw the changes in myself. I wasn't the same person who had walked into the courtroom, trembling with uncertainty. I wasn't the same person who had been betrayed by someone I loved. I had become someone who was strong, independent, and unapologetically myself. I was no longer defined by the pain of the past, and I had stopped letting fear dictate my choices. I was living on my terms, and I was proud of that. I learned a lot during that year: the importance of self-love, the power of standing up for yourself, and the strength it takes to rebuild after everything has been torn down. But most importantly, I learned that no matter what life throws at you, you have the power to rise. It's not about the circumstances, it's about what you do with them. And I had chosen to take my life back. Sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the lights of the city twinkle below, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had been through the storm, and now I was watching the sunset, knowing that tomorrow would be another day to live fully, to continue building the life I had always deserved. I had overcome betrayal, loss, and fear, and now I was free. Free to love myself, free to pursue my dreams, and free to live the life I had always wanted. It wasn't just a victory over Thomas. It was a victory over the parts of myself I had lost along the way. I had found them again, and in the process, I had discovered something far more important than just survival. I had discovered how to truly live. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the next chapter in my journey. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.